Imagine this situation. You just got an internship where you're making $10,000 per month, and then later you got a full-time job where you're making $80,000 to $100,000 a month. Now there's a lot of incoming of cash, and you are like, okay, I have this cash, but I don't know what to do with it, how to manage it, how to budget it, where to invest all this money, how to pay off my loan. These questions are in your mind and you're hoping that I wish I can go to financial advisor and just ask these questions. Well, good news is today's podcast guest is a professional finance planner. His name is Vrishin and he is going to help us answer all these questions. And if you have any further question about personal finance, any topic, please let me know in the comment section. We can bring him back and ask all those questions again. Let me know in the comment section. But for now, enjoy this video.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Yudi. I'm excited. I know this has been many months in the making. So
Yes.
for people who don't know me, I'm Vrishin Subramaniam. I'm a financial planner that specializes in working with Indian immigrants, getting better with their money and helping align their money with their ideal life.
And you also had the same journey like us students as well. So you've gone through that. But before we get started, I want to put a disclaimer that this is not a financial advice for people who are watching this. This is more like to educational purposes. And I am, Rishan, going to play a role of my audience because I know my audience really well. And I know the questions they have sent me on Instagram. And so I want to ask you these questions. How would you approach it? And what guidance would you give? So here's like the basic scenario that okay, I graduated, I'm making roughly 80 to $90,000 and potentially living not in Bay Area because you would be making way more money, but I know you also made less money. So
Yeah.
uh, imagine living in like some Seattle or some city, have a tech job, and but I also have a student loan about $50,000. I have to pay off that, but I don't know. Like now I have this like a cash coming in. What do I do with my money? How do I start? Like where to get started? Like what's the first thing I need to do?
I think the first order, and most people skip over this, is to establish a budget. I
Hmm.
know that you live on a budget when you're a student, but like when you start earning, you're like, amazing. I'm having all the money in the world, and you feel very rich. And when you work at an Amazon or a Google or whatever, like you're getting paid. I mean, $85,000-$90,000 is a lot of money, right? Regardless of, so a lot of people end up just spending their money and like enjoying it the first couple of months. I would say dialing in your budget should be the first order of priority, just so that you have a good sense of where it goes. And it doesn't have to be like every category I'm going to allocate like $20, $30, things like that. You can do like a broad budget. So I like creating a 4F budget, which is for future, where you're allocating money towards future investments or savings, your 401k, all of that stuff. Your fixed, which is your rent and other non-negotiable expenses. Your fun, which is your travel and all the other fun
Hmm.
discretionary expenses that you do. And then your fulfillment, which is thinking about giving back to charity or like doing in terms of self-development or anything else that you might want to spend on that's not like a regular recurring expense. So I would say
Hmm.
that is the first order of operations. And then second, the big question that people ask me is like, how do I pay off my loan, or like, how do I consolidate?
Before we move on to the next exciting part of the video, I just want to quickly mention about my newsletter community. We have more than 8,000 people who is receiving weekly free newsletter where we combine all the information which you're watching in this video into text format, which is easily digestible. It's a free, no cost to you. Also, we send out resources like product management guide, data analyst guide, job openings, and other resources which we have going on. So if you're interested in receiving such informative newsletter straight to your inbox, consider subscribing. You can simply go to udj.com/newsletter, or you can even go to the link in the description and it'll take you to the same page. And now I'll let you enjoy the next part of the video. And before even we get that, so for me, again, I'm not out of my student of avatar, and me as a UD, I follow $0 budget.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I have every single dollar assigned to something that's going,
Yeah.
and at the end of it has to be zero. So
Mm.
there should be no dollar which doesn't know where it needs to go. So
It's a very stressful the zero based budgeting is actually very stressful for a lot of people, because
mm,
no 2 months ever look the same, right? Like you'll
mm,
start and then you have something, and then you book 3 tickets for 6 travels in the next like 6 months, but all of that is occurring this month. and so then you have to figure out how to like keep your categories flexible. So I hate it. I actually do something called reverse budgeting. So what I do is like I make sure my immediate goals, which is the investments, the future liabilities, and then anything else that I want to set money aside for, are first taken care of. So the day my paycheck hits, I've automated contributions to go into my 401k, to go into my IRA, all the other
Mm.
accounts, and then
Mm.
the rest of it we don't really keep a track of how we spend it. Like as long as the goals are taken care of, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So you have a bigger categories versus like every single dollar type
Yeah,
situation. Now I'm making 85, $90,000. Actually, let's make it $100,000 because for the sake of simplicity,
yeah.
$100,000, and I'm paying in my hand. Like I get two checks, so in my hand I'm roughly getting $6,000 or so. So I'm getting $12,000. Rest of the money we don't know yet. They are either paying in Texas or HSA, or is the future already in that 12,000, or the future some of the 12,000 is because obviously that's the post tax.
uh, Post, if it's post tax, then the future needs to come out of that bucket. But if you're already doing your 401k and like the paycheck that you're coming after is after that, then you have to allocate less to the future bucket.
And then some you would say like, okay, these are my non-negotiable, like rent and groceries and paying off like bills and car loan if you
Yeah,
buy a Tesla.
yeah.
Obviously some people like to buy that. So
Please don't buy a Tesla. The first thing you do after you get out of college. That's so like
Come
one of
on,
the
you're
worst.
breaking hearts of so many people. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I agree. Don't buy Tesla. Yeah, and then they also have student loans. So all those combine into
Yeah.
that piece, and then future investment, and then fun. Like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm gonna watch Bollywood
Yeah.
movie or like go out and do things and etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that I have a budget in place, now the next question. There's two kind of follow-up question really comes down to, I want to pay off the loan fast as I can, but then I
Yeah.
also don't want to miss out on investments.
Right.
So how do I think about these two things?
That's like the next question that people immediately jump to, right? I like to take a break and actually tell people, get clear on what your values or your goals are.
Mm.
Because I know a lot of people, like we come with our own mindset of like, debt is bad, like we have to pay it down, right? But really, if you look at it, the system in the US is very different, where the country kind of runs on debt. So the whole idea of taking on debt is so that you can invest, so that you can get ahead. And a lot of people are not comfortable with that, right? So think about like how you would feel having $100,000 or $40,000 loan for that you've taken out for education hanging over your head at night. A lot of people don't like that, given that both you probably don't have your H1B at this point, so you don't know if you're going to have like more than 3 years of work experience. But a couple of people are like, yeah, I'll figure it out, right? Like at some point, you're making enough money to say it's okay. Like I will kind of keep this money aside, and in case I decide to go back to India, I will have enough money to just kind of pay off the loan altogether. But get clear on, are you comfortable with debt? Are you comfortable getting started investing instead? And really, one of the rules of thumb that I like to give people is, given that the historic rate of return on the US stock market is about 10% over the last 100 years. Um, if your loan is somewhere in the 7%, 7%, 8%, things like that, you're okay. You're okay leaving that as it is and starting investing. But if it is higher than that, then you have to really dial in and figure out if you're able to do just the minimum payment, or minimum payment just plus just a little bit while you're investing the difference. And that's something that has to come down to personal value.
And putting my student avatar back, I do not like, assuming I'm a personality, I do not like the loan as like because
Yeah.
I'm too scared. What if I lose
Mhm.
my job and layoffs and like immigration? What if I don't get it? Like I don't want to go back to my home country and burden my parents or etc. If that is my thinking process,
Mhm.
then what would be your advice at that point of time?
I would say you still need to get some part invested.
Yes.
So one of the common things that you will hear is start contributing to your employer 401k. Now, typically, if you're working at a tech company, you will have your employer is providing you a certain match, which means for every dollar that you put in, they will match it for a dollar up to a certain percentage of your salary. So, for example, your company might do a 5% match, which means if you put 5% of your paycheck, they will match 5%. But the way to think about it is that's money that your company is already committing to pay you. So you should take that. And as soon as you put money in your 401k, you're literally doubling your return. So
Hmm.
you should at least invest in that. And then do the payoff as you will, right? But yeah, definitely I would think about doing the 401k, at least to
Mm.
get a match to start. Sorry, and the second thing I would say is start building your emergency fund. Now,
Mm.
one of the first things that if you are somebody who is so risk averse, then think about building a cash cushion of 3 to 6 to maybe even 9 months, so that you have extra money sitting in the bank in case job loss happens, or in case you need to go back and you need to pay this loan off altogether in one go.
Yeah, and one of the common mistakes I've seen, back to UD role, is that a lot of students will say that they are investing in 401k,
Mhm.
and they haven't made any adjustment or the configuration in their settings.
Yeah,
So by default, it's 1% of your
yeah.
company. And there are rules when you sign up for 401k that they will only invest 5% if
Mhm.
you invest 5%. But if you invest less than 3,
Yeah,
which is like 1%, then we won't invest anything. So
yeah.
you're like literally throwing away that money. What's your advice when it comes to 401k? Someone doesn't even understand, like, should I do it? Like, how should I think about, like, what would you say at that point of time? Like,
Take a breath, it'll all be okay. More or less, the money that you put in the 401k is your money. They're not going to
mm,
take it away from you. The employer match that may have some companies I've seen, you need to work there a couple of years to get it. But more or less, the money that you're putting into that account is your money. Like they're not going to be able to take it away. Even if you go back to India, you will have access to it. There are tax complications where you can work with the CPA, but that is your money. Please do it, because one of the big things that you're missing out on in your 20s is the compounding effect of money, right? So
mm,
every dollar that you put in is about 40 or $50 in about 20-30 years, right?
mm,
So you brought up a good point where the other big thing, the big mistake that I see people doing in their 401ks and any other investment accounts is not investing. A
right.
lot of people forget that after you put money into that account, you actually need to go select a fund to buy,
Hmm.
and that is the second part that you need to do. So maybe you can create a video on how to, like, walking people through how to make 401k enrollments, and
That's a good
uh,
idea. I should do that.
how
Yeah.
to like select a fund, and how to think about retirement or target date funds or something like that.
So another quick question on, like, starting my job. A lot of these big company
Mhm.
will give relocation benefits, or like a joining bonus, right? So
Mhm. Mhm.
sometimes it's as big as like 10,000 to 15,000, and
Yeah,
for relocation they're also giving another 10. So now
yeah.
all of a sudden I'm getting this $20,000.
Mhm.
um, how would you say that if I'm getting 20,000, put it all in, paying off the loan, or invest some of it, or how would you think about these this all of a sudden, like, money I got?
Yeah, definitely kickstart your emergency fund, right? Which is the 3 to 6 months of expenses. I feel like you need to have that regardless of uh, how you are. That's just good financial practice, so that as you have expenses that come in, or as you have other things come on, you need to build that, like, buffer or cushion. So I would say that will kickstart your emergency fund, and just to have, like, the foundation set very well, set some of that money aside. After that, I would say maybe just throw it at your loan if you don't feel comfortable with the uh,
Having the loan, yeah, yeah,
with having the
yeah.
outstanding loan balance. I mean,
uh,
personal finance is 80% personal, 20% finance, right? Everything that
right,
we talk about is available. So
yeah.
people want to educate themselves. This is a great, starting step to do so.
Yeah.
But for people who have not taken that step, these are great scenarios to kind of think through. So I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And hopefully I can like we can do this live so people can actually talk to you and ask there because right now I'm assuming what questions they might have, but
Yeah.
hopefully they can come live and
Yeah.
ask you as well. So,
Yeah. I'm,
um,
I'm going to do a quick plug. I actually write on LinkedIn every day as an Ask Me Anything. So if people have
yeah,
questions,
yeah.
you can come and ask me on Friday. There's no strings attached, and I will try to answer your questions as best as I can. But yeah, we should definitely explore doing something.
You talked a lot about emergency savings.
Yeah.
I'm not sure like a lot of people probably know how to think about emergency fund and
Yeah.
emergency savings.
Yeah.
What is a typical emergency fund like for a month? Like I know you said 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9
Hmm.
maybe,
Yeah.
for someone who doesn't want to take risk, or is it entire salary, is it just the cost of living? How to think about like emergency funds?
Yeah, I would say at the very least, all of your fixed expenses per month multiplied by 3 or 6, right? So, which is your rent, your student loan payment, ability to buy food. If you have a
Mm,
car, the ability to pay your car loan, ability to cover a little bit of gas, anything you need to do to like survive and not be homeless. So,
mm,
ability to kind of pay for health insurance if you need sometimes, right? I think all of those are like good starting points to figure out what your emergency expenses. A lazy way of doing it is if you know how much you spend in a month, just multiply that by the number of months you want to have in your emergency fund. So you have
yeah.
$5,000 that you spend each month, which is hopefully high, but sorry, I'm kidding. If you have $3,000 that you're spending in a month, then you have 9,000 or $12,000 that you just in your emergency fund.
Yeah, same. I like to do 6 months because I am one of those risk averse person.
Yeah,
So I was like, if I lose my job, I
yeah,
and especially my family depends on me. So like, if that is the situation, then I want to be mentally be freed. Ki, ठीक है, if I lost my job, I
yeah,
have something I can go back and pull from that. Versus,
yeah.
yeah. But you really have. I feel like the hard part with that is you have to be disciplined to not pull it from there.
Mhm.
That brings me to like a kind of a hot controversial question.
Okay.
There are a lot of emergency, there's ways to put this money into savings. You
Yeah,
can create a separate account which is
yeah.
like just savings account, put the money there, so
Mhm.
that way it's not mixed up with your checking account.
Yeah.
And you automate it that every time money comes in it goes into your savings account.
Mhm.
Or there are these other like SoFi and like high
Yield.
interest, yeah, high interest rate real savings account, which is
Yeah.
like gives you like 4% compared to
Mhm.
like your normal chase, which will give you like
Right.
0.01
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I know Goldman Sachs and like
Mhm.
all these companies are big and huge,
Yeah.
but I don't think people think of them as a bank accounts.
Bank.
So it's traditional Bank of America and Chase and Wells Fargo and all of that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now to think about like high yield savings account, someone is providing 5%, is like, is
Yeah.
this really like, is this like, is my money safe?
You're right.
Especially with the Silicon Valley
Yeah.
Bank collapsing.
Yeah.
So
So doesn't matter where you keep your emergency fund. You need to have an emergency fund, whether it's earning 1%, whether it's earning 5%. That is small details that you are just like that are preventing you from making that decision. So have the money, put it in one account. Doesn't matter whether it's earning something or not. It needs to be in cash. It needs to be available so that you can take it out when you have an emergency. That is the number one point of an emergency. That being said, high yield savings accounts are pretty great to kind of create that barrier between your checking account and emergency funds so that you're not kind of touching it or it's not commingling with the money that's coming into your paycheck every week. At a US economy level, now what is going on is that they have something called interest rates, which means that the Federal Reserve has set a certain number which they are willing to pay out to banks. So the way banks work is they will take your money and then they give it to the Federal Reserve. They earn a certain interest and then they pay you slightly less than that, and then they keep the difference and then they pay you out whatever. So if the federal interest rate is about five and a quarter right now, SoFi or Marcus or Goldman is paying you a 4.75 or a 5%, and then they're keeping 0.25% of the yield that they get. So that's how banks work.
yeah, yeah.
That being said, most of these names are pretty reputable. If you are worried about your money not being available to you, you need to look whether the bank has FDIC insurance, which means that the bank is federally insured, and even if something happens such that the bank goes down, in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, your assets, your deposits are safe, and they will be available for you to take out. This is up to a certain limit. I don't remember the limit off the top of my head, but I believe it's about 100 or $200,000. So don't quote me on that. But as
Yeah,
long
yeah.
as they have FDIC insurance, the bank is more or less legitimate, and you should be able to bank with.
Would you recommend high yield savings account versus the traditional savings account?
I think it's one of those things that is, people use it as a distraction to prevent them from, like, starting that savings account. Because again, once you get into the high yield savings account discussion, there are multiple things, right? Whether I should do a traditional savings versus high yield, which provides the best interest, and then if the interest rate changes, should I move my bank every couple of months, which is a distraction. Really, you don't need to make those three decisions. You really need to just have your emergency fund parked. I would say yes, if you're not going to get distracted by making those decisions or overwhelmed by making those decisions, then absolutely open something, earn 4 or 5%. The federal interest rate will also change at some point, so as long as you understand that you may not be earning 5% in perpetuity.
We talked about emergency funds. We talked about what we need to do if I got a job, bonuses, etc. Now, the interesting part comes is like, okay, here's my out of your four F's, which is one of them is for future and investments.
Yeah,
How do I think about that? What does how much money should it be from
yeah.
my total money, and like how do I start thinking about where to invest this money?
Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about, which is goals, right? Get clear on your goals, get clear on your values. A lot of people I know will say, I have to start saving for a house, which I don't
Mm.
know how you do that, considering you're probably on your OPT and you've not got your H1B and you don't know how many years you're going to be here. But if that's something that is important to you, then I would say you need to carve that money out and put it into a different account each month, and that's part of your future that you're creating. But if you just want to keep it simple, there are a lot of accounts that are available to you beyond your 401k, right? You have your HSA, which is offered through your employer and your health plan. You have your IRA, which is not offered through your employer, but anybody who is earning money can uh, can open an IRA or a Roth IRA and contribute to it. And then there's just something called a simple brokerage account, which is called the demat account back in India, where you can also just put money and start investing in stocks, or I would say equities. And all of these have different tax treatments, but
I think people should understand the tech savings part of it as well. But if we can get into it like a little bit, like how, like you mentioned like four or five things, like
Mhm.
from priority perspective, like I as a UD believe that like okay we first is if you're getting 401k 5% 6% whatever,
Yeah,
like if
yeah,
employers investing you should always start there because that's a
mhm,
free money. You're
right,
instantly doubling your
right,
investment.
right,
But then like these are the other options,
right.
HSA, IRA, Roth IRA, all these options.
Mhm.
How do you waterfall it, and how much from your income would you do it?
I really think about it in terms of three different buckets that you are trying to fulfill, right? So in your life, you will have you will have three different sets of expenses that you're trying to fund. The one being furthest out is your retirement, but because you have the most amount of time to save for it, I would say put more money towards it in the first 10 years of working, so that you have enough time for that money to kind of grow and make an outsized impact.
Mm.
So to me, I would think that the 401k, which is a retirement account, and something like an IRA or a Roth IRA would be good to kind of start with. And so in 2023, I believe the limit for the 401k is up to $22,500, and the Roth IRA or IRA, which is an individual retirement account, the limit is up to $6,500. So you should try to at least do those first, because they will grow and compound by the time you retire. And then going into the second bucket, which is medium term expenses, right? So anything that is about 5 to 10 years out, you need to figure out if that's something that you're trying to save for. Yeah, I would put that in a taxable brokerage account, or just in a high yield savings account or a savings account, right? Because it would be something like, I want to buy a Tesla in 5 years, or I want to buy a
Mm,
house in 7 years. All of that is not money that you should be really investing in something that is volatile like the stock market. You need to be putting it in somewhere that's a little more low risk, something that's
mm,
like ideally earning something, so that you have uh, some returns, but like without too much fluctuation of the capital.
mm.
And then thirdly, it's the short term goals, which are all just going to be cash, right? Which is
Yeah,
anything in the next 1 to 3 years, I would say.
yeah.
But if I were to think about it in terms of what, like waterfalling, I would say 401k first. If I were to think about it in terms of waterfalling, here is what I do. I do 401k first, then I do an IRA, then I do my HSA, which may or may not be available to you through your employers, and then it goes into goals.
Yeah, I mean, and probably this calls for like videos for every single waterfall you said, right? Because
Yeah,
again, people probably need to understand HSA, difference between like two different. There's
right.
HRA,
Yeah,
HSA, FSA, so many
yeah,
health plans.
yes,
This was another thing when I joined it, and I was like, I have no idea. Like HRA sounds the best because it's the
yeah,
best deductible, but they are missing out on the tax benefits, and people need to understand tax side of it, so that they know it's literally another free brokerage account to you, tax free brokerage account to you. But again, we'll get into that in a probably separate video. I
yeah,
do want to touch on a few of the concerns with 401k. I think people think about this like, why invest in 401k if I know that maybe 6 years down the line I might just want to go back to India,
yeah,
or my home country?
yeah,
Then like, it's like, I'm not gonna, like, how do I get my money back? And if I have to pay taxes on it, like,
yeah,
because it's a tax deferred account. So
yeah.
so like, yeah.
I mean, I absolutely love this question. You know why? Because even if you go back to your home country, you're still going to need money to retire.
Mm,
Most people forget that. Like what is your strategy to retire if you're going back? You're you're still going to need money, and like you don't really have anything figured out. In fact, I would say you have less of an idea whether you're going to be able to make a career transition, whether you're going to get paid money. And in our parents or grandparents' day, they had something called a pension, right? Which used to pay out monthly. You work for an employer for 25, 30, 40 years, and then once you separate, they pay you a measly, like they pay you an amount which may or may not be enough to even keep up with inflation or like expenses, right? Uh, and so the US has since moved into a system where you self fund your retirement, but you have a lot more flexibility. And if you are younger, you have a lot more time in order for your money to grow.
mm,
So your money is still accessible to you in your 401k. The tax rules again vary by country, but you will pay some portion of it in taxes. I know for India, they say they will take 30% off uh, the money that you withdraw, and then give you the remaining 70%. And then there are adjustments on the India side. If you think about it, like, you not putting money away is actually, you don't have, like, having 70% of a watermelon is still better than having 100% of a grape, because
mm,
your money
mm.
is growing over time. And like, I would rather have $1 million and figure out how to pay taxes on it than have $20,000 because I didn't invest it in.
And what about the situation? So I was pretty sure, like, okay, I want to invest here, but like, there might be some who's like, okay, if eventually I want to go back, like, let's say
Yeah,
7 years back,
yeah,
and I want to go back because I have to take care of family, etc.
yeah,
Should I, instead of that money which I'm investing in 401k, should I take
hmm,
that money and invest into Indian, mutual funds or whatever? But yeah, so that's another debate people make with me. So I was like, okay, now I have Vrishin, so I can ask him this.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? So that goes back to what I was saying about get clear about your values. And I don't think it should be looked at from the lens of like what is the best investment. I think you have to look at it from the view of like what is the best investment option for you, right?
Mm.
You're not trying to like maximize the amount of returns that you get. I think it's perfectly acceptable to do both, one or the other or both, um, particularly given that you want flexibility. But I mean, the way I think about it, if you are, even if you are going back, there is currency depreciation that happens each year. So the Indian rupee depreciates against the US dollar about 3 to 5% every year, which
Mm.
means that if you go back, potentially having a dollar investment will actually hold up better against the Indian rupee. And that
Yeah.
being said, that is the situation now. Maybe in 5, 10 years they will change things. And same thing with the tax code, right? In 20, like as of this year, they have started recognizing retirement accounts and giving it special tax preferential treatment in India. So in another 10 years, maybe they will recognize Roth accounts, and they will change the way taxation works. You can't optimize for everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
kind of
And the other
do it.
part is that sure, if they let's say $100,000, 5% of my income, which I would be investing in 401k, which
Yeah.
what they are saying is that okay, instead of 5,000 in my 401k, I'll put that 5,000 in India. But what they are missing out is another 5,000 which they are getting from their employer. So they wouldn't get that. So they are anyway losing that
Yeah.
50% or like
Yeah.
almost 100% of that return which they would get. Another big difference I want you
Mhm.
to explain is 401k versus Roth IRA and
Okay.
IRAs. Like,
Yeah.
what is the major difference? And if you can, like, I know it's like a whole, like, it would take a lot of time, but
So 401k is employer sponsored, which means you need to be working at a company that offers a 401k in order to be able to invest. Typically, that's why they came up with the IRA, which is called an individual retirement account. You can open up and contribute to an individual retirement account or an IRA as long as you have any kind of income. So if you earned money, and if your even if your employer does not sponsor a 401k, you are able to open an IRA for yourself. The contribution limits are slightly lower, so you can only put $6,500 a year in your IRA. I would say you can do both together. Um, Now, in the IRA, again, there are two different tax treatments. One is the traditional, which works kind of like the 401k, where you don't pay taxes on it right now, and then you put the money, you invest it, and then once you take the money out, you pay taxes on it. Versus a Roth, which you pay taxes on the money right now, and then once you take the money out of the Roth, you are not paying taxes on it at all.
is there a age limit that when can we take the money out without any penalties?
Yeah. So the for any retirement account, so there's 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, things like that, the age at which you can take it out without a penalty is 65. If you try to take money out before that, you can, but you will get taxed. Plus, you pay a 10% penalty on it. Uh, if you work with a planner, I would say there are ways to get around these limits.
Hmm.
But that's like there are advanced strategies, and that's out of the scope of this video.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, yeah. You sound like an engineer. That's an out of scope feature request. And another fear people have is like, or maybe not fear, like they're unaware. Is that I have invested 401k with company A, Google. I am gonna switch to Amazon or another
Yeah,
company, Facebook, Apple. What happens to my old 401k? Like,
yeah,
can I do I have to maintain that? Can I transfer over that, or like how
yeah.
does that work?
As I said before, your money is yours, regardless of whether you leave the company, whether you leave the country. What happens is that account will just kind of stay at your old employer's 401k company. Company's 401k is not run by Amazon, it's run by a third party, typically people that are in the financial industry. So it'd be like big name like a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity or a Vanguard or something like that. And
Yep.
they run these finance accounts for almost all big
Yeah.
employers, right?
Yep.
So your money just kind of stays at the big name 401k provider. And what you can do is like you have three options when you leave a company, right? So typically you can leave it there as it is, don't do anything. It's still if it's invested, it still grows and whatnot. Second option is to roll it over into your new employer's 401k, which is you need to complete some paperwork, like merge the accounts. And the third one is to roll it over into an IRA, which means that traditional IRA that I was talking about, your 401k will roll over as it is, and there's no tax consequences for any of these three actions unless you know take the money out of your 401k and like you don't put it anywhere else.
Mm.
So make sure you follow through with either of these actions. And I would say I personally like to keep it simple, keep it all in one 401k account, just so that it's not extra paperwork and it's not extra things that I have to track and monitor and receive forms for and change beneficiaries. And I know a lot of people like to put it into the IRA because you have more investment options and you have more flexibility, but that actually may prevent you from doing more advanced
Mm.
tax saving strategies or financial strategies. So
Mm.
I prefer to just roll it over into your employer 401.
You talked a lot about goals, like figure out what your goal is, and a lot of time people are lost because they don't know what their goal is.
Yeah.
I know, I don't know if you still is that still active or not, but there was a big thing going on with the fire,
Hmm.
and like I want to retire early, and I
Yeah.
want to calculate my number, and
Yeah.
then I want to strategize how to think about goals. And like, let's say if someone wants to retire, like, do they think the end goal like that and
Yeah.
then plan their strategy?
And that's kind of what I do as a financial planner, right? I help people get clarity on what their goals are. But I would
Mm.
say goals are very tied to values, right? So who you are as a person and what you value is important to you. So, as a college student, you probably don't have much of this context, but once you start working, you'll realize that eh, I like working in tech. I don't like working in tech. Life starts happening to you. Like you want to go spend time with your parents. Like that's a value, right? It's not a it's a value that you're close to your family. You value being a family person, and as a result, your goal ends up being I want to go back to India to spend time with my family. So I would say think about who you are as a person, and from there you can kind of get a good sense of what you think your goals will be. And goals change over time too, right? We as people, we grow, we change. 1 year you are thinking about family, the next year you're thinking about starting a family. You're thinking you need to support your family that is back home, and they might need like an income source, and so you may not be able to pursue fire the way you said. So I think thinking through, what is important to you in life, whether that's independence, whether that's family, whether that's giving back to community, that will help inform what your goals look like a lot. And those I don't think will change regardless of visa status. A
Yeah.
lot of people that I speak to will say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I want to stay in the US. Like
Mm.
I don't want to go back to India because that's just not the place for me.
Mm.
And that's something
Mm.
that has come from the core of like understanding that, and
Mm.
as a result
Mm.
your goal is to kind of stay here, and you
Mm.
can then align your finances with it, whether that's figuring out figuring out whether you want to stay invested here completely, or whether you want to kind of uh, upskill yourself, spend money on upskilling, improving your career so much that you become an EB1 recipient, or an O1 recipient or something like that, right? So I would say everything is interconnected, but does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does. It does. And what does a typical goal look like? Like, give us an example. Like, because I think
Yeah,
I even when you were saying, it's like, okay, what is really my goal? So I was trying to think about that too. So I think
yeah,
it'll be helpful for people to know. Like, here are some of the examples, or like here's an example of like, what a typical goal. It doesn't have to be your
yeah.
goal. Doesn't have to be your client's goal.
I mean, there's the basic ones, right? Which is like, I want to buy a house. I want to drive a nice car. I want to not work. Like, I want to retire early, buy a house for my parents back in India. Beyond that, there are several other things, which is like, I want to be able to find purpose in my work. And so if you're working at a tech company, like how do you kind of think through, should I make the most amount of money and then say this is enough and then switch careers into doing nonprofit work, or should you look for nonprofit jobs right now and be okay with like taking a pay cut, but like
Mm.
have more career fulfillment? Those are second level goals, right? And then
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
third level is like, do I want to give back to my community? Do I want to give back to
Mm. Mm.
people? Are there specific people that I want to take care of? Do I want to make a change in the world? It's very easy to work in a tech company and say, oh, we're changing the world. We're manufacturing iPhones. A lot of people don't feel that that is a
Yeah.
that's changing the world or that's touching people's lives. So
Yeah. Yeah.
finding your purpose, finding your calling.
Yeah, in a lot of financial independence for me is like I want to do what I really want to do. Like I want to own my time versus
Right,
someone owning my time. So
right.
it's not the number necessarily.
Mhm.
It's like the goal is like
Right,
if if you have $1 million every single day
yeah,
deposited, then you're my best friend. But but if that was the case, what would your life look like? And then okay, if now that is your
yeah,
ideal life, like how can we
yeah,
like bring that? So
yeah.
yeah.
Have you seen the movie Office Space?
Mm-mm. No.
It's a great movie. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend you go watch it. But it's about a guy who works at a big corporate company and he feels like his job is a dead end job and he's just like paper pushing every day. And so at one point there's a scene where he sits down with his neighbor, and he's like, I think I want to have $1 million. So his neighbor asks him, why? He's like, well, so that I don't have to work anymore. And he's like, what would you do? He was like, well, if I have $1 million and I don't have to work anymore, I just sit around all day and do nothing, right? So his neighbor goes, yeah, I have a cousin like that. He's broke and he doesn't do anything all day. He's just sitting around as well. So it doesn't. You don't need $1 million to do to do what you say you want to do. It's really more about finding that fulfillment earlier than later.
Yeah,
So
regardless, this was fun. I am so happy we did this, and I can't wait to bring
likewise.
you back because there's so much more to discuss, like buy versus rent,
Oh,
and
there's so
should
much.
people buy Tesla or not, things like that. I think there's a lot more to discover, and I'm sure people will have more questions after they
Yeah,
watch this. So
yeah,
I can't wait to bring you back. Like Vrishin said, he post things on LinkedIn. And if you have questions, you can obviously reach out to him. I'll put his social media as well. And yeah, and if you're also looking for financial planner, I would highly recommend have one because not because Rishan is my friend and I'm telling this, like you don't have to have him, but just have one because they help
yeah.
you kind of strategize things.
Yeah, go talk to somebody, right, who's able to provide you direction. Ideally somebody who's a fee only fiduciary financial planner, and
Hmm.
have an initial conversation and see if it's a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And secondly, obviously, let us know down in the comments whether you want UD to do a video walking through how to invest in your 401k.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Thank you again. Can't wait to bring you back. But until our next one.
Keep smiling and keep hustling.